Hello, everyone, and I hope that you're doing great. Now, today we're looking at the CSEC Human and Social Biology paper. It is a paper 2 from May, June 2021. As always, please remember to read through the instructions carefully. And if you should have any questions or queries, please clarify them with the examiner before you start the examination. All right, let's jump into our first question. And this is section A, question number 1. And it reads, Table 1 shows some of the steps involved in the birth process. Complete the table by correctly numbering each step to show the correct order in the birth process. And so here we have the number of steps right here. And so the first thing will happen here is that we have a release of oxytocin. And the point to note is that oxytocin also causes milk to be released when the nipples are sucked by the baby. So there are 2 points where you have oxytocin. One, to cause a contraction of the uterus, which brings about what they call labor, and after birth to release milk from the breast. All right. And so based on this, though, we're looking at the birth process. So definitely oxytocin will be our first step. And then the second thing will happen here is that you have a rhythmic contractions resulting in the baby being pushed through the cervix and then the vagina. All right. And of course, this is again is where labor starts in terms of when oxytocin is released and the uterus will contract. The third thing will happen here is that the baby will eventually expel, and generally it'll be head first. And then the last thing will happen, we have expulsion of the placenta, which we call the afterbirth. All right, and so part B is a state 2 reliable methods of birth control, and we have 2 by ligation for females, and we have vasectomy for the males. We also have IUDs, and IUDs mean intrauterine devices. We also have pills, which are very effective, and the best of all is abstinence. All right. And let's go into part C. And for part C, so table 2 shows data collected in 5 Caribbean countries comparing the number of live births of women who attended antenatal clinics versus those who did not attend antenatal clinics. All right, and so here we have our countries. We have Grenada, Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and Suriname. All right, and these are our figures. The first column is for those who attended antenatal clinics, and the second column is for those who did not attend antenatal clinics. All right, and so the first part of this question asks us to do this is that on the grid provided on page 7, plot a bar graph to show the live birth rates of the number of women who attended antenatal clinics and the women who did not attend antenatal clinics for each country shown in table 1. All right, so let's just go to the graph real quick, and let me just kind of outline a few points that I think you should ensure that you have to get maximum marks. As usual, I will always recommend you to write a title for your graph, what the graph is showing, very important. All right, and also label your axis. Your y-axis is your dependent variable, and for this one, it is the live birth rate per 100 women. All right, that's on the y, and your independent variable will be your countries, and you label that on the x-axis. Again, if you're doing bar graphs, especially with 2 different set of data, then it's also best to give a key. All right, so that in orange, or those bars in orange, will be those who attend antenatal clinic, and the one in purple will be for the women who did not attend antenatal clinics. All right, and so we have a graph looking something like this. All right, and that will pretty much be sufficient to earn you your 5 marks. All right, so the next part of the question is to state which country had the highest number of live births as a result of their women attending antenatal clinics, and that is obvious even from the chart, and that is Trinidad and Tobago. For part 3 of this question, is to suggest one reason why some countries had low live birth rates, even though their women attended antenatal clinics. So even though they go to the clinics, what are some of the things could have a low number of live births? All right, and so one of them could be unsafe medical practices. So even though you attend, the practices may not be good, especially based on a doctor and all of that things. Because of course, even though they're professionals, some people just don't care. All right, and of course, lack of facilities as well could be another one. So depending on what is happening, if they have the facilities ready to carry out the process or not. Also, lack of transportation or assistance in some cases at the point of birth. So they may go to the clinics, but of course, in terms of assistance going to or transportation reaching may be a problem as well at the point of giving birth. All right. Also, it could be unhealthy diet as well, consuming drugs, abusing of drugs, drinking alcohol, and so on. Those things could affect having live births as well. All right, so there's a number of things could happen here. And of course, if you suggest any other suitable suggestions, they will take it as well. So you're not limited to what I have for sure, because I'm sure there are other answers that you may think about during the examination as well. All right. So let's skip past our graph now into the next part of the question. And this is part 4. It's a follow-up study was conducted on the women who attended antenatal clinics to determine the health of the mothers and their babies. The study showed that the mothers who breastfed their babies were healthier, and so were their babies. So both mother and babies, they were healthier to give breastfeed. All right, so as I suggest, one reason for good health in the breastfeeding mothers and one reason for good health in the breastfed babies. All right, and so these are some of the things that I have here for mother and happiness due to bonding and progress of the baby development. The mother is more happier, and of course, just to make a point here, because they say good health, and I will emphasize that good health or health in general is not just a biological process or sickness. It has to do with your social, your mental, your physical, right? And of course, physical is also biological. So definitely happiness is a part of good health. All right. That means you're less stressed, you have a better demeanor, and your whole being will be different when you're happy. All right. And trust me, you should practice being happy every day. This is a choice. Happiness is definitely a choice, regardless of what you're going through. Believe me. All right. Next, you develop good social skills because of bonding again with the baby. Also, the mother keeps weight in check because, of course, if the baby is feeding from the mother, then some of the nutrients that she actually absorbed from food will be transmitted to or transferred to the baby. All right, so definitely she will not have all of that stored nutrients in her body. All right, and then so that could help her to lose some form of weight as well. All right, and for the baby, in terms of a baby, the baby could acquire adequate absorbable nutrients, and I will miss out a C right there, but you could actually put that in. All right, supply with useful hormones, definitely get antibodies and obtain useful enzymes. All right, so those are some of the things that the baby or how the baby will benefit from being breastfed. All right, so let's jump to the next part of question. Question number 2. So figure 1 shows a diagram of a part of a food chain. We have organism X, we have process A, we have organism Y, we have process A again, and we have organism Z. And here we have oxygen going into the organism, and or the organism is using oxygen and then release carbon dioxide, and that is B. All right, and it says state what the arrows labeled A represent in figure 1, and the arrows represent really the flow of energy, or you can say it represents what organism is eating what organism, right? So the transfer of energy from one organism to the other. And for part 2 is a state what is occurring at the arrow labeled B in figure 1. So B, oxygen is converting into carbon dioxide. The process that does that is respiration. I can say cellular respiration. All right? It is not breathing, because of course breathing will have a mixture of gases, including carbon dioxide going in and carbon dioxide coming out, oxygen going in, oxygen coming out. So definitely that's not breathing, that is respiration. For part 3, is to identify the organism that is the primary consumer and the organism that is the producer in the food chain. And for the primary consumer, definitely is organism Y. And the first organism, which is X, is normally the producer. All right, so that accounts for that mark. All right, and so for part B, it says Stacy walks into her garden and sees mealybugs feeding on the leaves of her cotton plant. To protect the plant, she introduces ladybugs to eat the mealybugs. Stacy becomes upset when she notices a frog eating her recently purchased ladybugs. Later that day, Stacy sees a garden snake eating the frog. So there's a whole lot of eating organism between organism. All right, so let's see what they ask us here. So construct a food chain to present the information provided in the scenario above. And so first you have a cotton plant right here. Then you have a mealybugs, then you have a ladybugs, and you have a frog, then you have a snake. All right, and so the next part of the question, that's 5 marks for that. Okay, wow. All right, I don't know why they give 5 marks. That normally would be like a 2-mark question. That's just straightforward arrows. But what is very important though, you must have your arrows pointing in the correct direction. That's a must. And then you must have the organisms in the correct order. But I don't know why they say 5 marks. But anyway, that's easy 5 marks for most people. All right, next part of question, part 2. A month later, Stacy finds the garden snake dead and decomposing in her yard. Name 2 types of organisms that would be responsible for the snake's decay, really. All right, and so for the death, really is a dog could cause that. A dog could smash that snake. Mongoose generally will hunt snakes as well. Large birds, especially eagle, depending on where you live. And for the decomposition process, it will be bacteria. All right, so definitely bacteria will cause the decay to happen there. All right, so and of course, worms could feed on the snake as well. Just to make mention of that, because actually I asked you what's responsible for the snake's decay. So decomposition will be any detritivores such as bacteria, worm, fungi. All right, but I just mentioned the death right here. They didn't ask for that, but yeah. All right, so for decomposition, bacteria, worms, and fungi. All right, so any detritivores or detritivus detritivores actually could cause the decay. All right, or in a simple terms, decomposers. All right, so part 3 is that Stacy removes the dead snakes from her yard, and instead of throwing it into the bush, she buries it near the roots of the cotton plant. Explain how Stacy's action would be beneficial to the cotton plant. And 1, because the snake is decaying, pretty much breaking down the organic materials into simpler forms, and so it may slowly add nutrients to our plant. And again, the nutrients are from natural source instead of using inorganic fertilizer, hence less possible contamination, because it's a conversion of organic material to nutrients that are needed by plants, especially nitrates. All right, and the third point here is that the nutrients added are mild and not harsh. I should say not harsh right here, not just harsh, but not harsh. So the nutrients added are mild and not harsh. Hence the plant roots will not burn. All right, so we have a look at some mistake right here in terms of the typing. All right, so therefore the plant roots, and we have another plant here twice, so the plant roots will not burn. All right, if you use inorganic fertilizer like NPK and put it directly on the roots, that type of fertilizer may burn the roots of a plant. All right, so please, sorry about the mistake right here, but I can't change it because I know what will happen. It cause some problems when I do that. All right, number 4. So due to the nitrate content, the cotton will grow well because nitrogen from nitrates will cause quicker growth and development. All right, because again, nitrates in plants will be converted into proteins, and of course, proteins make cells, and then cells, more cells you have faster growth. All right. Now for part 4 is a state whether or not Stacy would have the same number of snakes in her yard as frogs, and the answer is definitely no, because the reason behind this is simply the number of organisms decreases along a food chain. And the reason why the number decreases is because there's a greater demand for energy as well. And of course, the availability of energy also decrease along the food chain. All right, so definitely the numbers of organisms on different trophic level will never be the same because of the demand for energy. All right. Now for part question 3, actually, is a figure 2 shows a cross section of the skin, and we have epidermis, we have a dermis, and we have the subcutaneous tissue, which is the fat layer. All right, and we have structure A and B, and structure A is erector muscle, and B is the sweat duct. All right, and of course on top we'll have a sweat pore. All right, and of course you can also notice the nerves within the skin as well. All right, just to mention that there. For part A, it said identify each structure labeled A and B, and we have that as erector pili muscle or simple erector muscle, and B will be the sweat duct. All right, for part B, is to complete the paragraph below by selecting the 2 correct responses from the word and phrases provided in the box below. All right, so they give us a number of things right here: negative feedback, positive feedback, control of body temperature, childbirth. And here said that homeostasis is the way in which constant conditions are maintained in the body despite changes in the environment. And this is a good way to remember what homeostasis is. Internal conditions are maintained regardless of what is happening on the external. All right, and here it said when the body detects changes within the environment and produces a response to bring it back to normal. This is describing A, and this is a negative feedback, because when you bring it in an opposite way to bring it back is a negative feedback. Positive feedback will increase the response, just to make mention of that. It's just like milk production is a positive feedback. The more the baby suck, the more milk you produce. All right, controlling temperature is a negative feedback. As temperature goes up too high, then you bring it back down to where it is a negative, so it's opposing. All right, so that's negative feedback right there. An example of this mechanism is control of temperature, as I mentioned. All right, so definitely that will be your answer there. For part C, is a state 2 responses which occur in the body when carbon dioxide levels in the blood increases, and one is increased breathing. And if you have a lot of carbon dioxide, breathing will be increased to obtain more oxygen, and this can lead to what they call hyperventilation. But definitely, you have an increasing breathing, and also you have increased heartbeat as well. All right. All right, and part D is a group of friends go to a party and drink excessive amounts of alcoholic beverages which are rich in carbohydrates. After drinking, they experience frequent urination and the following day suffered from extreme thirst. Explain why the friends experience each of the following signs or symptoms. And for one, frequent urination is a cause of alcohol inhibits ADH. And again, remember that ADH is antidiuretic hormone. And the point to note here is that antidiuretic hormone is responsible for retaining water in the body. And so you have an increased urine is a response to get rid of toxins, alcohol, and excess carbohydrate product. All right. All right. And so for extreme thirst, you have excess loss of water by urination, result in the body's cells being deprived of water, and hence the body respond in a sensation of thirst to trigger the need for drinking water to replenish the body. All right, and so that's why you feel thirsty, for you to naturally want to drink water. So the body responds. All right, and so for part E, it says in addition to frequent urination and extreme thirst, one of the friends, Pedro, experienced dizzy spells and lethargy the next day. It's a stately effect that drinking alcoholic beverages would have on Pedro's blood glucose level, and definitely it will have a decrease in his glucose level. And remember what glucose needed for is for energy. And of course, those are the reason why you actually feel that kind of dizziness and feel lethargic. All right, so for part 2 is to explain how Pedro's body would respond to eliminate the effect stated in 1. And 1 is that the liver will detoxify the alcohol. That's one of the things that may happen there, because too much alcohol in the body causing decrease in glucose. The body will want to get rid of the alcohol itself, so it detoxifies the alcohol, or simply break down the alcohol to make it be less harmful. 1, it could increase the production of glucagon, all right, and glucagon will convert glycogen that is stored into glucose, just to make mention of that. So glycogen converts to glucose more readily. That will be another thing that will happen there. All right. Now for part 3, it suggests the disease that Pedro's is most likely to suffering from and state why he would have experienced dizzy spells and lethargy. And so the disease here is called hypoglycemia. All right. And dizziness occurs because the cells are unable to produce enough energy to function. All right. Again, all cells need energy to carry their function. And if there's no energy, then definitely the cells will start to slow down their actions. And of course, you will start to feel a little bit dizzy. For part 4, well, not part 4, question 4, is a table 3 shows the steps involved in the large-scale purification of water from a dam. Complete table 3 by numbering each step in the process in the correct order. It's a one step has been numbered for you, and this is number 2, which is large particles of grit and sand settled. All right, and so the first thing you want to do here is removal of non-biodegradable materials from the water. And then the second thing, of course, is the large particles of grit and sands for sure. And then the third thing will happen here is that air is mixed vigorously into the tank with water, with wastewater. And this process we call aeration. All right. So aeration will take place there. And then the fourth thing will happen here is that the breakdown of organic materials by microorganism, that is cause we call it decomposition, will take place at that point to break down those organic materials. And then the final thing right here, we have disposal of effluent. All right, and that is when the purified water, well, not totally purified, but the safe enough water will release in larger bodies of water. All right, and so part B is a state 2 ways in which human activity could negatively impact water supplies. And one of them could be pollution by solid waste, sewage, or chemical fertilizers. And general any chemicals really, to be honest. All right, and then 2, contamination by chemicals such as bleach, pesticides, and so on. We could have low water supply due to climate change or drought. All right, and then we could have also an increase in microbes or pathogen due to deposits such as feces and other waste products. All right, and then for part C, we have Leah lives in a rural village where most residents make their living by raising animals and growing crops. Recent rains have left the village flooded, and Leah plays in the floodwater from early in the morning to late in the evening. That's a long time to be in that dirty water. Part 1 is a state 2 contaminants that Leah and their community could be exposed to after the flood, and that could be animal manure, because again, they're raising a lot of animals, so animal manure, which is animal feces, typically. And then she could also expose to insecticides or herbicides. Generally, those are pesticides, so they pretty much will be the same mark. All right, so pesticides and even, well, any chemicals they use generally on the farm could be in the water. Also, fertilizers could be another contaminant that will be in the water as well. And any other suitable things that generally used on farms may be a part of the list. All right, so anything else you think of definitely will be a part of it. All right, so it could be like even oils, because of course, depending on, well, it's rural. Of course, well, then again, some rural communities will have tractors and so on, and farm machines, depending if they have larger farms and so on. So even the oil from the machines on the farm will be a part of this list. All right, and so for part 2, it suggests 3 diseases that Leah and their community are likely to contract as a result of the flooding. And so these are some of the common ones that may occur after flooding, like dengue, malaria, hepatitis A, typhoid, cholera, diarrhea. All right, and so those are some good suggestions right there. For part 3, is I recommend 4 precautions that the residents could take during the flooding crisis to prevent the spread of diseases. And so we have 1 to wear protective shoes such as water boots. You could also add disinfectant, example chlorine to water. even though this may be a bad thing because it could affect other things such as plants and other organisms like fish that may live in the water. But in terms of a precaution for human safety, add disinfectant or chlorine to water. And especially for drinking water, for sure, if you're going to drink the water like stored in containers, then definitely you want to disinfect those water. All right. Also, you could boil water before drinking. That's another way to remove pathogens or microbes or microorganisms. You can also close windows and doors early at night to prevent the entry of mosquitoes. Also, you can remove stored manure to higher ground so they cannot reach, so the water cannot reach them, or they can deposit in the water. You can store chemicals, pesticides far from water source as well. Prevent contamination as best as possible. All right, so that will account for that question. And question number 5, it said the human skeleton is made up of approximately 206 bones. It identify 2 bones located in the chest region of the skeleton, and that will be our sternum and ribs. And for part 2, it state 2 functions of the skeleton other than movement. 1 produces blood cells, 2 protects internal organs, and 3 to store minerals such as calcium, and 4 to provides shape and provides also support. Part 3 of this question is said compare the movement of hinge joint with the movement of a ball and socket joint. And of course, hinge joint move in one direction, which is a back and forth movement. However, ball and socket joints allow movement in all directions in a rotational motion. All right, so that's the difference right there. For part B, it said after class, Tina was having an argument about ligaments and tendons. She believed that ligaments and tendons are the same because both are made up of connective tissues and are attached to bones. It's explain why Tina's belief was not entirely accurate. And of course, she's correct. And I mean, you can do it in points. So there's no, you can write in points, all right? So you don't have to write any long sentences all the time. So once you have the points outlined properly and well organized, you'll get your full marks. Believe me, you'll get the full marks. So it's not about the amount you write, as I always emphasize. It's about what you write. It's quality over quantity. And of course, she's correct because 1, they are made up of connective tissues for sure. They are attached to bones for sure. So those 2 statements that she made, those are correct statements. However, there's a difference in terms of making her totally correct. And she's wrong because they're not the same. 1 point. Both of them are not the same. All right, and the difference between the 2 is that tendons are attached to bones and muscles. All right, so connect muscles to bone, and ligaments are attached to bones only. So they connect bones to bones or bone to bone. All right, so that's the difference here. All right, so she'll make a slight error to say that they're the same because they connect to bone. Yes, they do connect to the bone, but they're not exactly the same. All right, and even the strength will be different as well. I could have mentioned that. All right, which one is stronger, weaker? You can mention those things as well. All right. All right, and you can also talk about even the movement because, of course, for example, tendons will be involved in the muscular contraction. All right, while the ligaments will only move in terms of moving the bone based on accordance to how the muscles are contracting. So those are just some extra points you can mention. Now let's go to part C right here. It's a middle-aged man goes to the clinic complaining of stiff, painful joints and decrease in mobility. Suggest the condition from which he most likely suffers and explain how he may have developed this condition. And so the condition is generally arthritis because, again, stiff muscle, painful joints, and decrease in mobility. And so just to make a mention right here that generally speaking, not always, generally arthritis is the wearing of the cartilage at joints. All right, so that's the general concept of what arthritis is. And so one way that he might develop arthritis is from constant use of the joint, or you can just say overuse of the joint, really. All right, and of the joint that cause the cartilage to slowly break down. And he said over time, the cartilage may get very thin, causing the bones to rub on each other. And it said when bones rub on each other, pain may be experienced along with difficulty in movement. All right, and that's what describing is symptoms up top. And a point to note that they're not just one cause for arthritis, so we have some other causes of arthritis right here. And so arthritis may be developed because of infection or other diseases. Also, injuries at the joint could cause or lead to arthritis. Overweight as well, because the bone, if you're overweight, then bones could be pressing on bones much tighter, and the cartilage are squeezing in between the bones, and so the cartilage may degrade much faster, and then you may develop arthritis after that. Age as well, because as you age, then the cartilage may degrade as well or deplete eventually. All right. So those are some suggestions. Last question here now for question number 6. A1 is a state, one example of continuous variation and one example of discontinuous variation. And continuous variation, for example, height, weight, intelligence, length of stem. And I make sure to put length of stem right here, because most times when you hear, even though we're doing human and social, I just mentioning that this is a plant. And of course, continuous variation is not only in human beings, but also in other organisms as well. All right. So it can be length of claws and so on. All right. Just to make reference to that, just in case you may need to know that piece of information. And this continuous variation, matter of fact, I must go back a little bit. But continuous variation is something that will change over time, and it is influenced by the environment or conditions. All right. And this continuous variation is what you're born with and what you will die with. Just put it as bluntly as it is. So gender is one. Born a male, die a male. By a female, born a female, die a female. And that is based upon your reproductive organs, your chromosomes, and so on. All right. So blood type, your fingerprint, your eye color, those things will not change. All right, even though there are cases that people may have a slight change in their eye color, but it's still a discontinuous variation. All right, part 2 is a state 2 reasons why genetic variation is important to organisms. And 1 is increased biodiversity, 2 is increased adaptation, 3 increased chance of survival, and 4 reduction of harmful genetic traits. So these are some of the things that may be as advantage or benefit from genetic variation. All right. And just to make mention here, we talk about increased chance of survival and increased adaptation. They're kind of similar. And the reason for that, why you may have increased survival or adaptation, is simply because if you have differences among organisms, one disease may affect one but not affect the other one, or certain environment may be best fitting for certain organisms, so they survive better than other organisms as well. Part B is that the Aedes aegypti mosquito live in warm climates and lay eggs in stagnant water. We have here the meteorologists predict that the Caribbean will have longer dry seasons, but when it rains, it would often result in flooding. Surprisingly, scientists predict that there could be an increase in the spread of mosquito-borne diseases during the long dry season. Because generally speaking, must be a surprising prediction, because generally mosquitoes spread the disease more when it is more rainy season, because they need the water to survive, lay the eggs, and so on. But here now it said, name the disease that the Aedes aegypti mosquito carries and identify one other mosquito-borne disease. And so the Aedes aegypti mosquito may cause dengue, Zika, chikungunya, and yellow fever. And other mosquito-borne disease here is malaria. And just a point to make is that this is the Anopheles mosquito that will cause the malaria, while the Aedes aegypti will cause dengue. And dengue is common. Malaria and dengue, those are the 2 common ones that we may refer to, especially within the Caribbean. Of course, recent times, we talk about chikungunya and Zika. For part 2, is to explain why scientists are predicting that long dry seasons could increase levels of mosquito-borne diseases. And 1 is that people storing water in open containers, and this may lead to continued reproduction, all right, because of course, you notice a long dry season, so people store water in drums, for example, and other containers, and even have storage tanks and ponds that may be open, and so mosquito could continue breeding those or reproducing those. Two is that mosquitoes may bite more to obtain blood for survival or just to simply keep themselves hydrated. And so you have more bite between person to person, especially if a mosquito is infected. Then definitely we may have a transmission of diseases between persons to person because mosquitoes are really searching for blood or fluid to survive. All right, and the third point right here is that the virus or pathogen may have a tendency to replicate more during drier periods, because again, dry periods could create a suitable condition for the pathogen or the virus itself to replicate more. All right. And a fourth point you could talk about right here is that drier periods or higher temperatures may increase in the rate at which eggs hatch into larvae. So we're talking about the incubation period may be shorter for the mosquito eggs because of warmth. You know that warmth sometimes will increase certain chemical reaction and also increase certain development as well. So definitely it could be a possible reason. All right, for part C, it said Brendan is a 10-year-old boy who does not like to bathe. That's a nasty thing. Or changes dirty clothes. Jesus. All right, it's aside from an awful body odor, which must happen, explain to Brendan three health challenges he may experience as a result of these practices. These are nasty practices, very nasty and very bad of Brendan. But anyhow, Brendan may develop skin rashes. And you may have skin rashes because of buildup of dirt and other chemicals such as sweat. A point to note, this is a 6-mark question, right? This is a 6-mark, a whole 6 marks, but I'm going to show you something. What they expect you to do is to list the 3 challenges that they ask you for and explain each. So 1 mark for the challenge and another mark to explain it, right? And so yes, skin rashes because of buildup of dirt and other chemicals, including sweat. You may have increased acne, and that's a buildup of oil and dirt as well, and also the clogged pores because of the dirt all over his skin for days or weeks or months. Those clog his pores, so that could lead to increased acne. And also pimples as well, all right? And you can have fungal diseases, and dry and warm condition may increase fungal growth and spreading of, and also spreading of the pores. It's supposed to not pores, but spores. So it's supposed to be there. The spreading of the spores from the fungi, especially if those are fungi with spores. And so for sure, like some organisms, because of the dirt and the moisture trap under the dirt as well, could lead to increased fungal growth. An example of that could be athlete's foot, ringworms, and so on. Lice. Lice is generally in your hair. And so based on he not bathing and changing his clothes, then this may be suitable for the organism to grow, mate, and reproduce without any form of disturbance, because they're just there, chilling, relaxing, and reproducing. When they're not bathing with soap and all those type of things to wash away the lice or the eggs or whatever it is, then yeah, definitely may be filled with lice. Another one is that social and mental well-being. And this one, most people overlook this. And my suggestion to you, if you're doing this, you need to explain it, because social and mental well-being, most people not consider this as an health issue, but it is. Because again, just to make a point right here, this may affect how others treat you, and eventually it affects your mental health or mental state. And a point to note, I will recommend that if you put social and mental well-being as a part of health, especially in human and social biology, you need to remind the examiner that health is physical, biological, social, and mental. So once you're not physically well, socially well, and mentally well, you're not healthy. All right, because remember that health is a state of being in a physical, social, and mental well-being. Okay, so that is an answer. But please explain to remind the examiner, because sometimes they may forget themselves. All right, so this is the end of it. And I thank you for being here, and I hope you do well on the examination. So I wish you well, as always, and keep blessed, and I will see you soon again. All right, take care.